I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker. So please welcome Annalisa Toccara. So Annalisa is an award-winning cultural producer, communications and marketing consultant, and journalist whose work and research focus on racial identity, anti-racism, sustainable change, and developmental trauma. She is one of the co-founders of Adoptee Futures, the first UK adoption organisation made by adopted people, which aims to reclaim the adoption narrative, reframing the world's view on adoption, and help adoptees heal. Welcome, Annalisa. It's lovely to have you with us. Katrina, if you could turn off your video, that would be lovely. Over to you, Annalisa. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Joe. All right, I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me. Fingers crossed. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Fab. Sorry, I'm just moving that out of the way. Great. So I'm going to set my timer because I'm notorious for going over time. So if you see me looking down, it's just because I'm looking at how much time I've got left. So yeah, I am the co-founder of Adoptee Futures. I am on the left of the screen in the little pink top, and my co-founder Shania is on the right of the screen. So we set up Adoptee Futures. Well, technically it would have been December, January of this year, and we came together after a discussion on Clubhouse. I don't know if any of you have heard of Clubhouse, but it's a social networking app, which is basically just audio. So at the time of lockdown last year, it was really, really popular. Everybody was kind of going onto it and kind of just chatting. So Shania and I met in some of the adoptee rooms. We we had like discussions with various different adoptees from all over the world, really. And it was a really incredible experience. Shania and I were the only two UK adoptees in the rooms. And what we discovered was that a lot of our experiences of being adopted were very, very similar to each other. So even though our experiences and how we came to be adopted are very different, there was some underlying themes that ran through all the conversations on Clubhouse. And it was a really validating experience, because I think sometimes you don't hear of sort of the full experience of what being adopted means. You kind of hear what's portrayed to you through the media or through kind of the narratives that are kind of set out by adoption agencies or organizations or social workers, but you don't actually hear from adoptees who are adults themselves. So for Shania and I, that was an incredible experience. And out of that, we decided to create something here in the UK, because for us, we realized there wasn't any support. And so we were like, let's do something. So Adoptee Futures is a mental health organisation. So we centre the lived experiences of adoptees. And a lot of the work that we do is sort of workshops, panel events. And also, to be honest, we kind of support one another. So it's really great that we came together through Clubhouse. If you want to follow either of our social media channels, if you go on Twitter, if you go to @Anna Toccara or @Adoptee Futures. So moving on to my next slide. So our mission, as Joe had said, is to reclaim the narrative, reframe the world's view on adoption, help adoptees heal through their trauma to evolve into the best version of themselves. That line, I think, is really, really cheesy, but it is entirely true. So our approach centres the lived experiences of adopted people embedded in an intersectional race equity framework, which we know from experience and research to be the most effective and powerful way to create and sustain system change. So like Shania and I, neither of us are about sort of just doing nice events. We want to see change, and we want to see change in the system, and we want to see a better future for adoptees. And so why adoptees? Because there isn't an organisation or a support system that currently exists that supports the life of an adoptee right up into and through adulthood. Now, that's something that I hadn't realised until kind of a couple of years ago. Adoption is something that I haven't really spoken about. I do lots of talks, and being adopted is just something that I kind of put aside and didn't really think how that had actually impacted me. And being adopted has massively impacted my entire life. But I've grown up kind of, I guess, believe in a narrative that tells me that adoption is great, that I had to be adopted, that it was the best thing for me. But actually, a lot of my experiences of being adopted haven't actually been that great. And so one of the things that Adoptee Futures aims to do, and what we do is to create this space where we can have conversations, honest conversations between adoptees, and also, you know, the wider publics on what actually being adopted really means in reality. We've worked with different organisations. So we officially launched, it was actually a festival debate in May, which was incredible. We had 153 people to our first event. And that wasn't just adopted people, that was birth mothers, that was people who work in the system. And then from that, we've worked with various different organisations, as you can see. We have been on panel events for National Adoption Week this year. And if you want to hear more about sort of what we do and our aims, if you go to the Adoption and Fostering podcast, we did an interview with them when we first kind of launched officially in July. So yeah, take a look at that. So what we do, like I said, we do workshops, consulting, training, facilitation, panel events, keynote talks, and co-production. So over the last couple of months, we've been sort of working with different adoption organisations, creating sort of panel events that highlight and show kind of the voices of adopted people. So this slide, being adopted is not a monolithic experience. So as you can see, in the middle of the picture, in the middle of the screen is my mum holding me as a baby. And then on both sides, it's my sister and I. So both my sister and I are adopted. We have got different biological parents. I like to use the word natural parents rather than biological parents or birth parents. So I might use those words interchangeably throughout the presentation. But my sister, so as the story goes, I chose my sister. So my parents adopted me when I was 4, but I was placed with them when I was 1. And so we used to go back and forth to visit my foster parents, and kept a really great relationship with them. And on one of the occasions we went, there was a little girl there, and I basically was like, I want her to be my sister, named her, and my parents were like, okay, and they adopted her. And she was never meant to kind of be part of our family. My parents hadn't wanted a second child, but you know, they adopted her, and they're, you know, she's in our family. But my sister and I, we have very different experiences of being adopted, and so it's really interesting for me actually presenting or being here today, because possibly like 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't be saying what I am saying today. I was very much of the opinion that adoption is great, that adoption is beautiful, it's the best thing ever. My sister, on the other hand, had a very different experience. And so for her, she never ever felt as though she fitted into kind of our family. One thing I don't ever want to do is speak on behalf of another adoptee, but my sister has given me permission to talk about her. So I do kind of talk a lot about her in my work, because our stories are very interconnected, and my experience of being adopted is very much enmeshed with kind of her experience of being adopted as well. And so even though kind of we've grown up and been raised in the same family, our experiences are very different. The way that our adoptive parents spoke about our birth parents are also very different, and we've just had very different experiences. And it's only really now that we can sit down and have a conversation, and that I actually understand my sister and understand kind of her views and where she's coming from. And it's taken me a long time to get to that place. So adoptees are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than non-adoptees. This is something that as Adoptee Futures we do talk a lot on, because it's really important that we recognise that adoption is trauma, that adoption comes from a place of separation, and that there is a lot kind of that goes on within a person, within a child who is adopted, right up into their adulthood. I'm probably going to have to fast forward quite a lot through my slides because I've just realised the time, but I think there's like 15 minutes with this presentation. So Adoption UK last year, or this year, presented the barometer report. So 54% of adoptees sought mental health support between the ages of 16 and 25, which for me, it shows that there's a massive concern there, because that's quite a lot of adoptees who need mental health support. We talk a lot about developmental trauma. It's a term used to describe a loss or a repeated trauma that happens in a child's key relationships at the early stages of their life. You can learn more about what we do at one of our workshops, so feel free to go onto our website. Developmental trauma can happen for a variety of different reasons. A baby or a child relinquished by birth parents, a baby has been neglected, a child living with a safe and loving family but who suffers sexual abuse from outside the family, a child who experienced severe health problems and multiple medical interventions. So there's quite a lot that can happen to kind of cause developmental trauma. A lot of the work, again, we talk about is duality. So it's recognizing that adoptees have two families. So yes, we're taken and placed in a family and they become our adoptive family, but actually we had a life before we were adopted. So on the left-hand side, you'll see my adoptive parents and baby me. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see me as a baby and then my natural mum and dad. So for me, I absolutely adore these two pictures side by side. My adoptive mum died about 6 months ago, and I recently actually 2 days ago, spoke to my natural father for the first time, and he confirmed to me that my birth mum died not long after I was adopted through the trauma of being separated from me. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that two truths can coexist, that I can talk about the trauma of adoption and still love my adopted parents. I can talk about my natural mum, still love my adopted mum. There isn't an either or, and that each adoptee's experience is unique and adoption is complicated and nuanced. So I really want to get across the message that every adoption is relinquishment, every adoption is trauma. And that's trauma for the parent, that's trauma for the child, it's separation, and that's where adoption starts from. People forget that a child is separated and that brings trauma and long-term issues, for example, identity issues, sensory development, dissociation, attachment development, emotional regulation, all of which I suffer with. Had never realized that it was kind of linked to adoption until kind of the last couple of years. And the more I've been researching, the more I kind of understand more about me as a person. And so adopted children become adopted adults, which again is something that I think people forget, that issues we struggle with as a child, they will come into us as adulthood. And to claim that adoption is not trauma is doing far more harm than you may realize or understand. The trauma of adoption is not a concept, which is something that both Shania and I have heard quite a lot since been doing this work, that people think that there's no such thing as trauma within adoption or trauma. And we're just like, yeah, there is. So if children are going to be put into a family with strangers, there's a level of separation. Therefore, we need lifelong support and free therapy. We didn't choose to be adopted. So we, as adoptee futures, we're fully in support of kinship care and family preservation. It's something that both Shania and I are very heavily invested in, and believe that that's kind of where the premise should start when we're talking or thinking about adoption. And what we want as adoptee futures to see is lifelong therapy for adoptees. So the Adoption Support Fund extended. The Adoption Support Fund only goes up to 25, and that's if you've got special needs, but it doesn't actually go into adulthood. Policy co-created and led by adoptees. I've sat on quite a few panels over the last couple of months, or spoken to quite a lot of people who actually aren't adopted. And a lot of the adoption organizations are run by adopters and not by adoptees, which I think is a bit mind-blowing. And so that's something that we're really, really invested in. And also seeing a narrative that recognizes adoption is trauma, because if we're not recognizing that narrative, we're actually doing a disfavor and we're gaslighting lots of adoptees who do struggle with trauma. An emphasis on more funding for kinship care, family preservation, educational workshops for prospective adopters and current adopters on the realities of adoption, and for adoption to be recognized as an adverse childhood experience, because if it is recognized as one of those, we might actually get better help. So I'm going to leave you, I've got 3 minutes left, I think. So I'm going to leave you with this little graphic, which I absolutely adore. So I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but feel free to contact me and I will send it to you. But quite a few of my friends over in America are working on adoption and foster care abolition as a movement, which I think is really exciting, and it's something that myself personally am really passionate about. So it's looking and calling for an envisioning of how we do kinship care, how we do community-based care, and how we draw from and connect to other abolition movements. I think it's really important that we recognise that adoption as a system, a global system, is rooted in colonialism, capitalism, white supremacy. It is a $14 billion industry globally. And so it's really important, and something that you know, that as Adoptee Futures, we're kind of connecting in and working with other adoptees across the globe to kind of raise the experiences that we go through personally, but also how can we envision and kind of do adoption here, like what does that look like for us? And so yeah, so if you want this graphic, please do let me know, because I absolutely love it, and I think it's just a great way of how we can dream and envision the future of what kind of child welfare looks like, but rooted in kinship care. And I think that's it. So thank you for listening. If you do want to contact us, then that's our email address. We're Adoptee Futures on Twitter, and our website is adopteefutures.org. So thank you. I think I've just made time. So I will stop sharing my screen now.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Annalisa, for hearing about your work. Great work that you're doing with Adoptee Futures. That was brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that with us.